Now, speaking of the squad's characteristics, Julius Randle this season does not have to do as much as far as carrying the scoring load night after night. And I spoke about this in his contract renegotiations. When the Knicks added Kemba and they added Evan, of course, Julius Randle, him negotiating his deal kind of made sense because he just wasn't going to be required to put up those same numbers night after night. And we see it playing out this season. As the game in Chicago, he didn't really have a strong scoring output, but at the same time, he was still effective because he almost got a triple-double. And guys like RJ and Kemba, they got cooking. And the same thing happened in the game in Philly. He kind of didn't really have to score as much, so he didn't have to attempt as many shots, but he was still very effective as he almost triple-doubled in that game also. And there were 5 other Knicks that scored over double digits. And there was a few other Knicks that was in the cusp of scoring over double digits, with guys such as Obi, Burks, and Quickly in that game were almost over double digits coming off the bench. So there was a lot of love to spread. And Julius Randle, especially with his vision, this guy low-key, man, he does everything. So there's other ways of him impacting the game outside of carrying that scoring load night after night. And let's not forget that game against the Pelicans. Randle only attempted 9 field goals, but 5 other Knick players were in double digits, particularly RJ. That's the game that he went off in. But as you can see, Randle was still very effective in that game. We're also going to have to credit the way Tibbs is kind of playing out these lineups. This year's squad is very deep, and sometimes the way he rotates these lineups, he has Randle kind of going back to his original form of just playing that kind of point forward position. That pretty much worked really well last season, but in certain key spots in the game, Tibbs will go to a lineup that will allow Randle to play out that role. And just looking at other characteristics of Tibbs lineups, as we could see, Kemba and Rose, they're pretty much splitting minutes right now, especially Kemba. He's hovering around 20 to 25 minutes a game. It's good to see that right knee is holding up. His three-point shot is on point. At times it's spotty, but Kemba, for the most part, he is holding up. But pay attention, my fellow Knick fans, to that right knee all season, because we got to really see how that's going to play out with Kemba. Also, Evan Fournier. It's great to see Evan, man. He really bought into this Tibbs type of style, which I didn't really expect, but he's fiery as fuck right now. And that's something that we haven't seen from Evan, I would say, in the last like 2 years. He looks like a Tibbs type player right now, and he seems like he's fully bought in. And Obi Toppin, oh man, Obi looking more polished. I mean, did you see that move that he pulled in Philly in that transition where he just got that layup, just stretched his arm out? He's just looking more poised, more focused, more balanced. Because remember, in his rookie year, there were times where he jumped too far away from the hoop and he mistimed it. He just looks more poised, especially coming off that transition defense. That's where Obi flourishes, man. And it's a beautiful thing to see. Just with Obi, hopefully his three-point shot gets a lot better. And also, it'll be interesting to see in case Julius Randle has any DMPs or any injuries or any just family emergencies where he misses a game. It'll be interesting to see how Tibbs plays Obi. Because I'm telling you, coming off that summer league, Obi just looked way more polished. And he actually separated himself from sort of the guys that hover around the G League and in between being in the league. He just distanced himself from that crowd. And I'm just wondering how Obi will look if given the consistency of playing about 30 to 35 minutes a game for at least a week, to just give us Knicks fans that sample size to see how does that really even look like. And I'm just remembering now, while talking about Obi and just him flourishing in transition, our transition defense is lacking right now. We're last in the league in transition defense, which is unreal. And we've seen it play out in both of our losses so far, especially in the game against Toronto. The Knicks had too many turnovers, way too sloppy, and in transition defense, they just weren't there. Toronto played a lot harder than the Knicks did. I don't know where that lack of energy is coming from, because sometimes we've seen it with the Knicks, especially closing out games. They're just not as assertive. It's kind of a gray area. It's kind of weird right there. But in the games against Orlando and Toronto, in which we lost, you've seen that same kind of lackluster energy. We just didn't have it. The other team was beating us to the ball, you know, in scrappy plays. It was just weird. Even though in those games we had good amount of stretches where we looked like we could have dominated those teams, but just that energy didn't carry over for all 4 quarters. But at the end of the day, we should be confident that all this is going to be addressed, because the Knicks don't want to fall into that rut of just overplaying opponents that they think is going to be difficult and then underplaying opponents that they deem to be a lot younger and easier. Like Toronto didn't even have Barnes play that night. And for them to just outplay us, especially with OG, OG is not really even a scorer like that. We just had him looking like Vince Carter out there. I don't know what was going on. But once again, the Knicks hopefully don't fall into that rut of just overplaying tough opponents and then underplaying opponents that they deem that are easier. Because we tend to see that this is a position where older veteran teams or kind of championship teams kind of fall into, but they actually have the breathing room to fall into that because they can go up to another level. But the Knicks, we had a great start this season, but hopefully we don't fall into that right now, because that's a bad habit to have, especially in the position that we're in. We're still building, we're still learning, we're still trying to figure shit out, and just underplaying opponents, especially in the games against Orlando and Toronto. I feel like they kind of downplayed their opponents subconsciously. So that's why they were getting out hustled like that. But if we played opponents that were deemed to be tougher opponents, we'll kind of overplay it. Once again, it's kind of a tricky situation, but hopefully Tibbs, especially Randle does not like that shit. And that shit gets addressed real quick, especially after the game against Orlando. So it is what it is. I'm confident that these issues will get addressed.